My name is Monique van Dusseldorp. I'm only here from the organization to say this is an Ask Me Anything session, which means you can ask the CTOs of Amsterdam and London anything you want. We're waiting for London CTO to enter the system. So there you go. And we're waiting for everybody else to move to this session. Let's see when they arrive. So who is here? And where are you from? Let's start there. Oh, Marcus is there. Linda's there. So we have a London and Utrecht and Duivendrecht in the system now. There you go. Hey, Ian. You are, staying in the conference. I really appreciate that. It's good to see you here. German to via London. Oh, international people in our audience. Here we are. All right. The only person we're really missing at the moment is Theo Blackwell. Let me see if he arrives soon. And if not, we're going to just do an Ask Me Anything with the CTO of Amsterdam. All right. People are arriving. Okay, Ger, you can just, share thoughts with you if you want.
Yeah, well, it's an Ask Me Anything, not a talk about everything session, basically. So I'm happy to
out of the picture in a moment, but I just would love for Theo to come in so that I can,
exactly
leave the session.
Nice to have you over here. Maybe this is an opportunity to ask a few questions to you. I'm not sure if anybody wants to ask a question to Monique, basically. She's organizing this event.
I don't think anybody.
How is the event going?
I think it's super interesting. I mean, these online events are, they're strange creatures. There were 700 people signed up, and we had amazing turnout throughout the day. And then, of course, it flows, it goes back and forth. And this is really an industry that is inventing itself at the moment, and you have to try out things, and not everything works. But yeah, I think the people that are together.
What are the big differences then? Except for people enter and leave easier probably in sessions.
Oh yeah, you click in, you click out, you completely forget the whole event because you're working on your emails. This happens to all of us, right? It's just another screen in a way. It's just another screen. Yeah. But if the event works well, then it's no longer just another screen. It's a place where you meet the people you want to meet. And I think for some of the sessions we had today, that really happened. So I'm very happy with that. Yeah. Okay, there's a question. Well, yes, Linda, you can start with a question. Now I start to moderate because that's what I do. But I should just.
Yeah, but you're very good at it, Monique. Yeah. So.
Linda, what's your question?
Hey. Shall I text Theo, or did you already did?
Yeah. So, are you going to type a question? Are you going to come in and ask a question?
She already did.
Oh, what's your tech-related guilty pleasure? Guilty pleasures. It's a good start.
Yeah.
You secretly use iPhone while you're really an Android guy, or you. What's your guilty pleasure?
What's my tech-related guilty pleasure? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking exactly about this.
Safe, right? Keep it sort of in.
No, I would say I am secretly on TikTok. But I think that's part of what I should do, basically, because I should know what happens on TikTok. It's happening in Amsterdam.
What does TikTok show you? Because that's completely different person to person, right?
It's an interesting. Yeah.
I get lots of 40-year-olds.
The interesting thing is, when we talk about the future of the internet, and everybody talks about how the internet should be more open, etc., and then we use all those examples from 25, 30 years back, and we involve people who are in this world for the last 20 years, and all they have their ideas about the world, and we ask them, are you actually on Snap or on TikTok, etc., and nobody is. And then I think, how can we involve people who actually expect the internet to be like TikTok in this thinking, basically, and we're not very good at it. We still have people talking about the internet who use a laptop and they're in a big screen and want to have all this information, etc., etc. Well, actually, a lot of people just want to have relevant information in a very small screen. People don't like television or small screen. So this is what I get from TikTok, basically, to see how people do think about what's the internet, what's freedom of the internet, etc. I think my secret pleasure is used to be my Raspberry Pi, using to download movies, etc., and make little applications for home, like the thermostat, etc. But since I moved, I'm not allowed to do that anymore because my girlfriend wants things to work nowadays in our home. So actually now Super Mario Lego is my new tech pleasure, I would say.
See, that's an excellent answer. Super Mario Lego, ladies and gentlemen. There you go.
Which is brilliant. So you need to set up your own platform game in-house physically, and you have this little Mario puppet dropping around, killing people, etc. And you need to have 1 minute or 2 minute track throughout the home. You need to, kill your opponents, gather coins,
living in the city of Amsterdam. Now I know that the CTO has Super Mario Lego.
Yeah.
All right, I have questions. We have questions, and seriously, I should step out. The moment Theo comes in, I will step out. But here you go. How do I become CTO of a major city? And he doesn't mean Utrecht. He means Amsterdam. How did you get there? What was the route?
Well, interesting question as well. I mean, in 2002, 2012, the city of Amsterdam decided that they needed to transform a bit more in terms of economy from a financial services city. I mean, we looked at New York, and they actually started in 2002 becoming a tech city. London started to become a tech city after the crisis in 2008 and started to make policies around that, and we didn't. So in 2012, we thought maybe this something we should do as well. And then at that moment, I was running our smart city program. And the deputy mayor said, "Hey, I mean, what do we need to do to become more tech type of city, basically, because we're financial services, maybe don't have the future on the long run," which was probably right. And then we did a little scan about Amsterdam, about the ecosystem, startups, etc., but also in the knowledge industry. We didn't have a technical university, so we did a tender from a technical university. We started our startup program. And then during this thing, we discovered that actually within the city, there wasn't that much knowledge or, actually interest in what's the future of the city itself. I mean, we do mobility, we do health. I mean, all this 50% of GDP is government related and government services related. But we didn't really have a view on where the city was going to. What was the impact of platforms for Amsterdam? We were responding to what's happening in the world. So we decided to create a role.
You realized this awareness wasn't there, or there was a whole big department?
I advised it to the city, actually, and then I suggested to 3 or 4 people who could do this job, basically. And then the general exec said, "Okay, maybe you should do it yourself because you have an opinion about these things."
What's your background? Are you're a bit of a tech guy for sure, but what's your study background? What is your expertise?
I studied arts and a bit of philosophy, but I used to do, to earn some money during my student time, I did some programming as well at the university. So, etc.
I studied arts, but I never became the CEO of a major city. Now, let me see if there's other questions here. Questions, ladies and gentlemen. Is it true that the Dutch police was an early adopter of predictive policing? And what was the experience and the lessons learned? Oh, this is a big question. Care. In the meantime, can somebody find Theo? Because he's supposed to be in this screen where I'm now. Okay, ignore that. Care. Policing.
Yeah, I did text Theo as well a moment ago. My all the guilty pleasures like to text people while I'm in the future.
All the time.
Well, actually, it's a good question. I mean, I'm not obviously not the Dutch police, but we collaborate intense with them. And we show also, we did some site visits together with them to NYC and to Chicago, where predictive policing is a big thing. I would say they practice with it, but I mean, predictive policing is a scary thing in the end, because everybody sees that as well. I mean, we did in our first open data challenge we organized in Amsterdam in 2009, 2010, which I wasn't involved in, but was organized. And then the winner app of the competition basically was an application where you could see what was the best place to be a burglar at that moment in time. So they made a little app with streetlights, with the police stations, with the income of people, and the era where the houses were built. So old homes in an area with not that much light, on a far distance from a police station were the best place to be a burglar. Oh, and the streets shouldn't be a dead end, so you should go left and right. So they created this app, how to be a burglar. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And actually, this was the starting point for us to talk with the police, basically. So, hey, when people start to do this, can we do this other way around as well? Can we start to make... and then we did some analysis. So predictive policing didn't really take off. But what we did do was make analysis of the city of places where people actually... where a lot of breaking in, a lot of burglars, basically. And then we ended up with dead-end streets, example given, are relatively safe, because you don't want to do a burglary in a dead-end street, because when the police comes in, you only have one way to go, etc. So we actually start to think about these things. What are the right things to avoid criminals to do stuff like that? But, I mean, real predictive policing in the Netherlands didn't really take off yet, I would say.
Okay, but you experimented with it, and I mean, this is one of those stories where the people that, I've been in tech conferences forever, so I always work with people that's like, "Ooh, new tech, let's do something with it." And I remember that the first Wired conference in London that I helped curate, we had the police guy from New York that had installed all this data from all these districts, and it was so super interesting, and he could track everything. And then last year I heard this documentary, it's a podcast actually from Reply All, but they pointed out what happened, and it was just miserable, because it meant that the police officers themselves were held accountable for having, many arrests, and they started to arrest everybody for everything, and the whole system was crooked as well. But
No, that's it. That we see in Chicago as well. When you analyze really what happens is that they start to arrest more people. Or they start to go more to a certain neighborhood, start to arrest more people in the neighborhood, start to find actually, people actually did something wrong. So in the statistics, it works basically, but they don't know how much they miss in other districts where they are not policing anymore. So it's an interesting way. This is what algorithms basically.
Yeah, and data sort of, were not good. Okay, let me just go to questions. What do you think about the level of knowledge and understanding of tech of politicians? Is it good enough? Is it getting better? And are you doing anything to change it? This is somebody who works with you that asks that. I mean, I think.
Well, our deputy mayor launched the algorithm register this morning, basically. So we're getting up, I would say. An interesting thing is that I would say yes, basically. I mean, I spent... this is the second elected parliament that we're working with, basically. We started in 2014 with the CTO office, and so we had a local parliament. In 2018, there came a new parliament, and also new deputy mayors, etc. So interesting thing about that is that I would say we used the first 3-4 years basically to create awareness with political parties, etc., etc. So last elections, there was actually interest in the several party programs, and it was a small opportunity elections. But what you saw is there's now a deputy mayor who is a digital city deputy mayor. So I would say that the notion is there. And then in terms of knowledge and importance of choices you can make in tech, etc., I think we need to make steps.
Feeling that the notion is there, that it's important, but to really understand it, you need to be, educated, trained, be an engineer, being a program. You need to have more knowledge than you can have if you just follow the normal political career. I mean, it's like I recently traveled over the Afsluitdijk, and there was a big statue of Mr. Lely, and he was an engineer, and he basically became a minister of state, and then said, okay, let's, Close of IJsselmeer, let's run a railway in Suriname or whatever. You need to be an engineer to be able to think of plans like that. So right now we're building a digital structure that we're going to live in for the next 100
years. So I would say
power that needs to understand it really.
Yeah, but in a broader way than only digital technology, I would say. I mean, when you look at the Dutch government, I mean, they're basically all politicians. There's not a single engineer. I mean, they're all studied something with law or with policy or something with finance, but none of them is an engineer, basically. Which is a strange thing, actually, because when you go to China, look at China, Chinese cities are steered by engineers. I mean, every mayor in China is an engineer, basically. So you can look at the difference how people look at a city as well in that perspective. I mean, we think law is important. We think business models are important. We think social studies are important, basically. And then you can become a politician. But engineering, I mean, you just do the work, basically. This is a thing that, especially in cities like Amsterdam, with two traditional universities, not a technical university, it has been in our DNA for the last 300-400 years. Partly a good thing, partly not a good thing. So I do think that engineers need more space in the public domain, and it will be software engineers, also hardware engineers, and everything that comes with that as well, or even architects or whatever. But I do think that there's more interest. I do think people are willing to, but in general, there's not a big urge for people and politicians to deep dive in the topic they're steering. I mean, they see the role being a politician. Actually, I think on a certain level, that's a good thing. I mean, more important is that we actually educate civil servants who actually can do a proper job and advise properly, basically. And also, you don't want to have politicians who are going to review your code probably. I mean, but you do want them to know that there is a choice in it in terms of, the algorithm makes automatically decisions and it's potentially discriminating on the people, etc. So I don't think the level of knowledge should be understanding it, but not really. Well, they don't need to make code themselves per se.
As long as they're civil servants who make the plans, really do understand what they're working on.
Yeah, exactly, and can make a proper advice, and then civil servants should understand the political choices behind it as well. So.
I'm looking at it. So I'm looking. This is always for the people that watch somebody on stream who sort of looks sideways to the chat. But this is my role in this thing. Have you noticed there being much more attention for your work as these topics have gone a lot more mainstream? And say yes, Amsterdam is a leader in this space. No, who are the leaders in this space? And can it also be a burden? I mean, is there a lot of expectation from the audience that things will work smoothly and everything will be fine? What do you think? What is the role if you take on the leader position, and what then happens?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the moment you start, people start to say, hey, can you please build an app and solve everything? And then at the beginning you think, oh, of course we can, and then you discover that things won't change in half a year, but will change in years, basically. So what we now try to, we don't make it go per se always smooth because we learn new stuff every day. But we do start with explaining people that what we do is basically design. And in design, you need to, think first and then start to co-create something, build something, learn and test, and then do something, basically. And once you start to align on that expectation, you solve a lot, basically. At the beginning, traditionally, people expect from an IT services department, example given, just provide us with the software so we can do whatever we want to do. That's what we don't do. We don't provide the software. We ask them, okay, you say you want to do this, but what do you actually want to do? You want to solve poverty? Okay, let's talk about that, basically, and not about the system you need to do so. So it's about creating the right expectations, I would say.
So here there's a question. What's your favorite experiment from the CTO or another city department from the last 2 or 3 years? What are you proud of?
There are, a bunch of things, I would say. A favorite experiment. I like the fact that we nowadays can do A/B testing physically in the city with roads, example given. So we have the system where we actually measure all the traffic continuously. So we can close down a road if we want to for a day, and we pretend we're doing
every
maintenance.
Road all the time. Okay, this is.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just to test something. So it's not even repairing something, but sometimes it's just
necessary. So what do you test?
So we can do A/B testing in the city.
What do you test?
Sorry?
What do you test? If you do that, what do you test?
What will happen if we close a road? How people will respond to what they do? How does it impact for cyclists, for pedestrians, etc.? Something you can think of, but something you can never see when you do it in practice. So, this is not, obviously this is not a good example, and we don't do this all the time, but the idea is that we actually measure, we should do something in the city, and we can actually see the effect instead of we try something for 10 years and then discover this is not working, basically, is totally different. So the way we organize traffic nowadays is different in that perspective, and actually the traffic department is organizing this themselves nowadays. They don't even need us anymore. Quite impressive, actually. They're nowadays talking about we're shaping stuff.
Seriously, before a major road reconstruction is taking place, the traffic department will actually A/B test how to best close off certain streets in the city, and they.
Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, but that's the idea. That's the general idea. And then how do they track this? Because this is a CTO-related example. They can track this via certain sensors or what? What's the CTO?
Yeah, traditionally we do it with cameras and license plates. So we follow people with the license plate, how they go to the city. Last 2 years, we made deals with basically every big navigation company as well. So we talked to, Waze, TomTom, Google here. And together with them, we actually can now do directly push stuff to their maps as well. Because people don't look at the signs anymore, they look at their navigation in their car, etc. So we nowadays get their data as well and see what happens. We also see what routes they select, etc. And we can also do this, not physically even close roads, but we can theoretically we can close load the navigation systems.
Yeah. It must give a feeling of power, you know. It's like you have this city.
But it would have been if we could do it with a press on the button. We need to have. I mean, we're civil servants. We have a lot of meetings about these things.
So what are examples from other cities that you think are super interesting and that you would like to also do in Amsterdam? I mean, what are the top 3 things that you can do as a CTO in a city that you think are truly worthwhile doing? And what is there?
I mean, the interesting thing is that every city is doing its best in a certain topic. I mean, so and generically, I mean, there are a lot of cities who are trying to learn and be advanced in certain themes. So we learn from several cities. On the one hand, we learn from cities like Singapore, which we're completely different than Singapore. But the way that the government still has an influence on certain communication infrastructures, etc., sometimes makes me a bit jealous. Basically, we would do it differently. Not for we would probably make it more open and transparent, etc. But the idea that you actually have your own frequencies to use without being depending on commercial contractors, etc., sometimes is interesting type of thinking. Yeah? So I like that thinking. I think now you have 5G coming up. I think government should claim a certain part of the frequency for to be.
It is coming up all over Europe. Are you sort of doing a lobby?
Yeah, lobbying my ass off. Yeah, lobbying my ass off. Yeah.
So what would you do with that frequency once the cities have their own?
Well, I can imagine you want to have certain, and the whole stack of communication. You want to make sure it will be transparent and open for everybody. So when people would interact with us, I mean, you want to give people access to open and transparent networks without having all types of platforms in between you don't know of. And all types of business models on telcos and others to earn money with your data, etc. So I can imagine
5G, super fast internet offering in the city to anybody, where they don't get tracked and they don't have any worries that big American companies take the data.
And maybe not when you are planning to use your Facebook or Google. I mean, because then it doesn't matter that much. But for the stuff you need to do with the city or your health or education, I can imagine you would make something.
I
can imagine stuff like that.
To that idea as well from the telcos.
Yeah, well, I mean, telcos are not there's a bit of discussion about it, so I think this would be interesting to get a bit of more to make sure one level higher in the stack you get influence. But also cities are not an example at all. I mean, currently in Riyadh you have U20, so Saudi Arabia. The deal they made with platform companies in terms of mobility, in terms of taxis, example given, it's quite interesting. They just take the data, get the data, and actually they do the management of traffic into a certain point where there are too much taxis. They say there's no demand. They do demand management basically.
Okay.
Interesting.
So now I have Singapore and Riyadh. I mean, what's the next city?
Nice examples, aren't there? And then obviously
because they can just decide it and it happens. So that's what happens to Singapore.
And then obviously you have a bunch of cities like, I mean, Helsinki, obviously, where we collaborate quite intense with on algorithms, AI, and these types of things, and Barcelona and London, and all of these cities are basically more comparable to what we try to do, but all cities in their own way. And what I like about collaborating with these cities is that everybody thinks European to a certain extent, but still it's a bit different though, because it's I mean, in Helsinki, they just want to solve stuff. They're engineers. They have engineers who steer the city, basically. In London, private sector is more important. In Barcelona, I mean, they're way more community-driven than we are probably. So they're all a bit different, but all try to find their ways to be transparent, open, and provide technology that works for its citizens instead of for the government or for businesses.
I must admit, it was also a nice thing to see today, just to hear all those different voices from all over Europe, trying to communicate with each other about the same problems and having their different points of views. Let me see, what country has got the most coverage of, I don't know if this is a question for the CTO of Amsterdam, but what country has got the most coverage of citizens having internet connection? In Scotland, 1 in 5 people still have no internet. Whoa, that's terrible. I think in Amsterdam we're doing pretty well if you compare it. I don't know, probably Singapore is a country with best internet, right? It used.
Yeah, there's a bunch of countries that has 99%, including the Netherlands, but most northern.
Yeah, including Europe would be
Sweden. And mobile access obviously is almost everywhere nowadays as well. So I would say in Amsterdam is 99% or something. Because it's an interesting question, because it's not only about are there any networks. City of Amsterdam also provides connectivity to people with low income. We have kids who go to school, need internet, etc. We provide devices and we provide internet as well. So it's not only about, it's also about
it didn't
affording
policy to connect everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So even like New York, no, but not everybody's access to the internet.
I've got a question from Ike van Avon. He says, okay, you're successful because you draw outside the picture now and then, outside the box. That helped grow the CTO office. When did you go a bit too far off the grid? What did you plan that just wasn't good, didn't happen, was too wild, didn't, was there a plan to put all of Amsterdam on open source software and it never happened? Or what? Something?
Well, that would have been nice, actually. Now, I would say when we try to arrange that we would co-develop together with a bunch of our engineering agency. It's the let's say actually, I wasn't not still there. Basically, I was a bit more ambitious, so I wanted to take part of the city from the traditional development to a new type of organization with a few others to co-develop a city, and then I started to talk to agencies who were project developers. I started to talk to architects, etc. And then basically somebody said, hey, you're not responsible for this. This is not your thing, basically. So get rid of us. Yeah. Don't get rid of us. Sorry.
You still think the idea. It was just other people.
But actually, I was quite advanced with the deputy mayor and a few construction organizations to make that happen. So then I thought, sometimes people need to be a bit in there. When they're responsible for something, you need to respect that as well sometimes.
So what? The CTO is a sort of a term that can mean a lot of different things, right? You're not responsible for running the network of the city of Amsterdam. You're responsible for tech-related issues within the city and plans and so forth.
Yeah, but I do think sometimes we can be. But sometimes that's different. We make mistakes. I think there are things are still happening to us where we could have been more taking our role. Basically, we used to be quite a small department, and things would happen like shared bikes in Amsterdam. I think if we could have been a bit earlier in interfering in these things, and while we were thinking, mobility department not listening to us. Okay, so
for those that don't know, for a moment you had some Chinese companies throw shared bikes in the streets, and then they were all pulled off again. So it's
it was overnight. There were like 20,000 of them or something. It was ridiculous.
And now they're gone. Well, here in Duivendrecht there's still 2 standing, but most of them are gone. Yeah.
Are you in Duivendrecht?
Yes, I am in Duivendrecht. Yeah.
Oh, I am as well. Probably you didn't know.
But suburb of Amsterdam, surrounded by.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were referring to my house when you were saying somebody in Duivendrecht. But okay, cool.
Here I am. What big topic or policy have you changed your mind about over the past few years? I think I'm from the generation that thought internet was good, and now we think internet is bad. So that's a huge topic. But what big topic have you changed your mind about?
A few of them. Started with. I used to be more enthusiastic about the concept of startups, basically, and now I see the way startups pivot to profit instead of that they pivot to solving something. So I'm a bit more skeptical about that. I used to be quite enthusiastic about it. Basically, every topic that startup had a good idea, I would say, "Yay, let's start to collaborate and make this happen." Basically, but nowadays I'm a bit more or less naive, I would say.
Less naive
because other people. Because other people want to do a crappy thing, but it's hard to foresee the impact.
So it's almost like saying, okay, I used to be all for capitalism, and now it's a notch down. Because
but even in a way, even when you have this, when you have this I mean, like this lease bikes, swap bikes nowadays, swap feeds, maybe nowadays, basically. It's great. I mean, I use them, but still, I mean, it would have been nicer when I could have them repaired by local. That's not one in Dusseldorp anymore. But the local bicycle shop, I mean, there's not one in Dusseldorp anymore. But I mean, one further in Oost probably will be one. Yeah. So I mean, that would be nice, isn't it? I mean, so how can you make sure local ecosystems still have a chance with companies popping in globally? Yeah. I mean, the impact that I mean, you always see. The other thing is, I thought that cities were a good thing and cities should have grown, basically. But when you really deep dive into it and you get all the money the government put into cities and you start to look at cities, I mean, they're an opportunity. But also, well, look at COVID era right now. They're also a challenge in terms of health, in terms of safety and security, in terms of poverty. I mean, cities are earning money and are a good thing, but creating a lot of problems. And I'm less naive in that as well nowadays, I would say. So actually, I'm starting to understand again why people actually move down to smaller villages far away. And the whole idea with COVID that you start to work 2 hours a week.
Very.
Yeah, that's best of both worlds, obviously, but not everybody could live over here.
We have farms and things like that. Okay, let's see what other.
We have one farm.
Okay.
Not farms, one.
No, and a church and a field, a sheep.
Yeah, two churches.
What keeps you up at night? Is there anything in your work where you think like this is really so worrying and I don't know how to solve this, and this just keeps my brain working when I want to sleep? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I would say especially now, even more than in this time than earlier. I mean, I really see that. I mean, the difference between people who do have an opportunity, poor people, rich people, is getting bigger, basically, especially in a city like Amsterdam, where we, just like in Vancouver or Boston or San Francisco, just a few years later, basically, see that a lot of people come in with a lot of money, with decent jobs, etc., or refugees are coming in. So by design, we get a gap between rich and poor people, and this is getting more and more in the city, I would say, and this is getting an issue, basically. So you get poor people supplying drugs for rich people type of thinking, basically, and this is getting more and more an issue, I would say. So I'm a big fan of initiatives like Tech Grounds, etc., who actually try to bring tech to different sides of Amsterdam as well. Yeah. And you see that's not even about talent; it's about the language we speak and how to involve people. Like the same startups I was talking about this earlier. I mean, startups. I mean, they design something to earn money, so you need to have a credit card to actually use the app. I mean, 70% of people living in a city doesn't have a credit card. So by design, we actually exclude people in a lot of new things, and this is an issue, I would say.
And this is not an issue that tech can solve, right? I mean, this is a big.
I don't think tech can play a big role in solving, but it's also how we design tech. And I do think also that to make it more inclusive, tech could play a big role, but that's not pivoting to profit. That's pivoting to solving something.
Yeah. Let me see. There's more questions. There's a very particular one. If you boost libraries in Amsterdam, what would you do and why? Now, and I have to just interject that, especially now with COVID, I think I've got 2 teenagers, my children. I think public spaces have become so important. They're more important than ever. Parks are, the saving grace of a city, but also libraries. So boost libraries in Amsterdam, which are we have pretty good libraries here. What would you do and why?
We're going to invest in it as well. I mean, that's the interesting thing, I would say. We're investing quite substantially in libraries at the moment, and on Zuidas with Open Next. And the whole thinking behind is that libraries are more and more a meeting place for personal development. So they play a role in curating knowledge, in curating information, actually learning people how to cope with information. So from fake news to numbers, whatever, to learn stuff, basically. So I really like our collaboration we now have with the library in Amsterdam, who has 23 places where they're based at. They're in the neighborhoods, and there are already, but it even can be more a place for people to interact with people, start to understand information, start to understand stuff. Because I do think learning is not something a lot of people think learning is something you do at school, but more and more I think people start to see that when you talk about lifelong development type of thing, lifelong learning type of thinking, I mean, you need places to interact with people, and this is not only online. So even when you do your online courses, I mean, I think it's still logical to interact with other people, which are not on the screen, but sometimes physically, in a place where they can help you to curate information that's relevant for you. So I strongly believe that libraries can be the platform for personal development in Amsterdam, and even probably more granulated in Amsterdam than they're already right now. So I'm a big fan in digital in the role of playing a digital library, but actually curate relevant information for you in a way that it's not only the thing you want to see, but also in a way you could tap into it and interact with other people.
A real tech question here by George. Which of the disruptive technologies, blockchain, hydrogen, etc., long list, are used in Amsterdam? So what disruptive technology is already here?
Yeah, the good thing is, well, I mean, Amsterdam is. I'd say the good thing about Amsterdam is that experiments and everything, and probably we have most pilots per capita around. We're not very good in scaling up many things, but we're good at doing experiments and pilots. So we do hydrogen ourselves with waste cars. We do hydrogen in a harbor, etc. Quite a bit. We did a bit of blockchain. Maybe I could say something about that, but I think I'm not a big blockchain fan at the moment, because I think it's, well, for the most of the things we need to do, we need to work with trusted partners, and encryption works perfectly, so we don't really need blockchain. We try to work with streaming data quite a bit right now, which is interesting for us. Not to store everything, we just tap into stuff, see what's happening right now, real-time city thinking, basically. We do a lot of AI.
What field do you use this streaming data? Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, a lot about traffic and crowd management at the moment. People moving through the city, so we don't want to have that data, but we do want to know what's happening right now. And well, that's quite a few bits of data that come in from cars, from cameras, from sensors in the city, etc. But obviously, this is going to internet traffic, can be streaming data as well. And most of it, I mean, the only thing we're really investing in of these things, I mean, we are followers in all these things, is that we actually, Timon has a nice addition to that. And the really thing we're investing in quite a bit at the moment is artificial intelligence as a city. And then we see our role not as we don't invent AI, we don't develop it ourselves, maybe a bit, but it's about how can we be responsible working with it.
So how can you give me an example of how this is? And by the way, for anybody listening, there's a session tomorrow where Maarten Sukkel is also explaining a little bit more about a very specific application of machine learning in the city. But can you explain a little bit, where is the city at the moment using this?
AI?
Yeah.
So obviously there are a lot of companies working with it. For ourselves, we use AI in a few fields, mostly experimental, to be frank. We use it in practical and day-to-day. We use it in how we answer questions. When you digitally fill out a form, you want to do a complaint about Amsterdam, melding.amsterdam.nl. We use a simple algorithm actually to redirect you to the department that actually is going to clean the problem without a call center in between, without 25 questions, just to make a little analysis of the text. We use it in a bit in traffic management. We use it to predict where people, how crowded it will be tomorrow, how many people there will be in Amsterdam tomorrow. We use it to recognize objects in public space.
This is an in-between question, but so you actually monitor a lot of the traffic in the city and where crowds are, and you predict.
The prediction is interesting.
Where the prediction came. I mean, there must be a lot of organizations and companies in the cities who would also like to know. Is this information you share with others?
Not yet, but in a few months we will.
Okay. And what kind of companies or organization will you share it with? Could it also be with?
Well, when we share it, it's open. Okay. Otherwise, we won't make a selection. No.
Yeah. So even the shop could say, okay, the city of Amsterdam says it's going to be busy tomorrow or not busy tomorrow, and I can.
Well, actually, then, and obviously the weather forecast is most important, but for the rest, it's pretty predictable. I mean, people, tourists are all doing the same thing. I mean, and visitors as well. I mean, they're pretty much you plan to go to a city for 3 days, you plan to go to 3 museums, but after the first museum, you go to have lunch, and then you, just wander around a bit, have some drinks. I mean, that's what everybody does. And then you're going to have dinner in this traditional Amsterdam restaurant at the Leidseplein. So, I mean, this is what happens, basically.
And if the city sort of has all this data, can predict more or less the flow of people through the city. So what processes does the city itself base on those data sets? I mean, is there something that happens automatically when 100,000 extra people in the city, so it means automatically police officers.
Yeah, so we use this for cleaning and for law enforcement nowadays to help them to know where they need to be at what time, basically. And more we try to step into the customer journey, basically. So when we use this quite a bit with football matches, when we used to have audiences over there with 50,000 people. We nowadays
could hear them actually.
Yeah. Actually, that's why we have all these blue lines. People are not allowed to park over here. But it's a lot about testing when to give the proper nudge for them to take public transport or to go to parking place 1 or 3, etc. And then we delete the data afterwards as well. So next time we try to find ways to do this a bit privacy aware.
But it's not like the city predicts so many people come into the city, so automatically, without any decision making, but connected to those predictions, some things happen, like extra police in the streets or the cleaning, or am I just trying to see this machine of the city and where the algorithms come in?
Well, it works. I mean, we push nudges, and so it's not direct. Now we push messages to them, and people actually make use of it. But in the end, obviously, it would be logical that we automatically putting in the routing and the staffing. And
okay, which thing that bothers you at the moment would you change if you became the national CTO for a short period, and then would go back to Amsterdam? That's a very specific question. So you're the boss of the country, and then you come back to Amsterdam. What would you change?
I would make sure we would get a decent public cloud accessible for small municipalities, etc., with standardized applications. I mean, now you see that for Amsterdam it's okay, but every small municipality struggles even with having their websites online, etc. So I will make sure there will be decent support for municipalities in the Netherlands that they actually could just touch into a platform where they could do their IT stuff.
Okay, that's a really big one.
And obviously stuff like open source will be the only thing we would procure, etc. So, but that's a bit too logical, I would say.
Okay, well, it doesn't happen. So, even though it's logical, it doesn't always happen. So, open source everywhere.
Yep, you're right.
By law, a decree. I recently learned, Timon is asking this, that the Dutch Privacy Authority is the biggest in Europe. To what extent have smart city projects in Amsterdam been the subject of complaints with the Dutch Privacy Authority? Have you been told to the authority, like, what's happening here? Yeah.
It's a good question, because when you look at the statistics, you saw that there were privacy leaks reported in the Netherlands. There were like 40,000 of them last year, and in France there were only 8,000 or something. And then you could say, hey, there are more privacy leaks in the Netherlands, but actually no, they're not more privacy leaks. I mean, the Dutch actually report privacy leaks. Yes. So that's a bit of a different item. So they're very busy, right? Yes. They just did the privacy authority just did sent a query to a few cities and did interviews afterwards to the 10 biggest cities, I think, because they actually didn't. They were working on stuff in healthcare and education, etc. But everything that has to do with IoT wasn't really in their scope, to be frank. So they assessed on a very light way the stuff we were doing. So that we didn't never get a warning or something, but we work with them basically now on how can they make a decent way to control these things, because they're only with 200 people and there are a lot of things connected nowadays. We do have our own privacy authority in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Privacy CPA, where we actually discuss every project with. It's an independent group of people. Which we actually, I think once a month there are 1 or 2 projects we discuss with them basically. So we try to be as strict as possible on the stuff we do, and there are quite a few things we decide not to do basically.
Can you really name a thing that you wanted to do but you didn't do because the local or national authority said? No,
I'm not sure if it's me wanting to, but it's things that pop up within the city basically. I mean, even last month, obviously a lot of things popped up using telco data to see how people move around through the city. didn't make it. Measuring temperature of people outside to see if there's a risk that they have COVID, example given, didn't make it. I was not in favor of that as well, to make sure that, but I mean, some people wanted to see if we were allowed to. A lot of things we want to do with cameras, colleagues of mine wanted to do with cameras, didn't make it, etc. So there are quite a few things we look into. I mean, the only thing we had, and the long discussion we have with the Dutch Privacy Authority, actually, but I'm working with them, is that the police actually want to have access to our traffic cameras, which are not allowed to, but they want to. So that's always when the police knocks at your door and say we want to have access. It's always a bit of a complicated discussion. But there we work together with the Privacy Authority, who actually help us and have the whole concept of that the data is only being used for the purpose you gather it, basically, do bidding. So then we work with them. But actually, we didn't really have subject of complaints yet.
Do you feel that the Privacy Authority, locally or nationally, have adequate knowledge? Do they understand all the issues as they should from a technological point of view?
I think they focus too much on privacy, and that's what they do properly. When you come from a law school, you look at privacy. I mean, they do what they do quite well, I would say. Okay. But on an ethical level and a discussion about, I mean, I would say no, that's not their job. People don't ask it for them, but that's something where you see a gap between what we need and what's in place.
Let me see. What other questions do we have? There's 53 people in the system hanging around here, so I want to hear from them. It's Ask Me Anything. So and let me also move up. Okay. If I want to move to Amsterdam for a little while, would you support a digital nomad type visa like Estonia? I think we're getting a lot of Brits to come over to Amsterdam. Not only.
Yeah, I would say only when it's actually you can actually use it. Basically, I'm not sure what's the status in Estonia, but obviously at the beginning it was more or less a gimmick, basically. But it would be logical to make it easier for people to register over here, obviously. And the interesting thing is things you want to do when you could decide on everything. I think a lot of people from London or Manchester or Copenhagen, Stockholm actually feel more connected to these cities, and I feel more. Yeah, I'm more a Londoner, I would say, than I'm live in the south of the Netherlands or in the east of the Netherlands, basically. So you could actually start to work with Visa between the cities, basically. So you click into the city and be part of the ecosystem, have your discount card, etc. So we had these discussions actually for a while with Tel Aviv, who have this local Tel Aviv card, basically. Say, hey, when people come to Amsterdam, maybe they can get a discount as well and start a business as well based on their local idea. Problem in the Netherlands, we don't do local IDs, obviously. So, but I would be a big fan when you think about digital identity. An interesting session earlier this day. Think about digital identity. Why not connect this to the cities and provide people with services, maybe even on the city level, not even on a national level, because national governments are too complicated most of the time.
I mean, I used to live for a short while in Manchester, so I know Manchester. But Ian, digital nomad, not e-residency, as long as UK stays within the EU, any nomad can come here, right? I mean, this is a tough one at the moment. Okay, who has a new question? I'm going to scroll up because I probably missed a few. See this one we had. Okay, it makes sense that cities would collaborate across borders to shape technology, but what about less densely developed and urbanized places that are often left behind in terms of connectivity and maybe under more financial pressures as well? Do you work with any regions? And also, cities, regions, how do you see that?
Do we work with any region? Yeah, well, what other cities or regions? Yes, so we collaborate quite intense with, I mentioned before, with Helsinki, London, and Barcelona, I would say. Algorithm register with Helsinki launched today. Digital rights with Barcelona. I mean, there are a lot of things and actually, I think European cities are the cities where it's easiest to share knowledge, to learn, because same language, more or less, the same way we look at stuff. And then we work a bit with New York, and I think, these are our closest relations we have. And then more and more when we work together with cities, we actually try to build stuff as well together. So it can be software, it can be platforms, we really want to put people in a team and do stuff together.
Yeah, very much city oriented. I can hear that. Let me see. We had those.
Simon is asking when we will have forbid face recognitions in Amsterdam.
Well, I know. Maybe Theo will call in 5 minutes, thinking that it's earlier or later. I would love to hear more. This is from Lubna. I would love to hear more about the city or cities are tackling supply chain management and transformation in these changing times. This is a big one. This is a management book, but supply chain management in cities.
Yeah, supply chain. I would say I'm not sure what do you mean exactly with supply chain? You mean IT sector or just products we buy, etc.? We do change our whole procurement process and also the way we organize our supply chain, basically based on challenges and not based on paper-driven procurement. So we, on a lot of challenges we have or tasks we have, we actually now organize ourselves in partnerships with companies and even smaller companies, especially smaller companies, I would say, more than we would traditionally procurement in our supply chain. And when you look at supply chain, I'm not sure but when you mean logistics, example given throughout the city, because that's obviously we're into as well. This is one of the challenges we have. How can we make this more efficient? Because we have a 10% increase of small fans on an annual base nowadays for the last years in a row because everybody's ordering online stuff.
So you're working hard on processes. I can tell you, as one of these really tiny suppliers of the city of Amsterdam, it's tough. It's tough. I know, it's tough. Anyway, we have time. We
didn't pay you yet, do we? No.
I entered an e-invoicing experiment, and I probably shouldn't have. I'm.
No. But we actually are creating ourselves a new vendor platform to make this easy.
Yes. Okay. In the experiment. Some cities in the USA have started to forbid face recognition technology in public space. This was a topic of a whole session today because it's a huge topic. Ban in Amsterdam, and would that even be possible for a judicial governmental perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't use facial recognition by ruling. But we decided not to do this ourselves. We won't allow the police to do so in Amsterdam at the moment. So the mayor won't allow the police to do so at the moment. And this is the policy we have. We don't do facial recognition from governmental organizations we now have. I mean, the big challenge, obviously, is that everybody with a smartphone nowadays could do facial recognition, and this is a challenge, actually. Yeah. Because Amazon provides facial recognition nowadays. Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc. So we're working on that. Announce, I would say in 2 months probably, which we're now looking at wide ways to organize this legally properly, is that we did an algorithm register today, but we want to make one for sensors as well. So we want to make it mandatory for people when they put a sensor in public space, they actually put it on our map. So it won't be a permit, but it will be a meldplicht at first. Because we think people have the right to know who's collecting their data, where, etc. And with regards to facial recognition, where we can, using every instrument we have, we would like to forbid it. For the moment.
We're almost wrapping up. So the last question here is, where will the CTO office, your office, be in 2 years? Swallowed up by the bureaucratic system, too big to fill, or challenged by a new small innovation team? Where are you going with your department? What is the role you want to play in the city?
Well, great question. I think we have. There will be more mature innovation teams being organized within. We're actually in a bit of a restructuring of our own organization. We've grown a bit, so we now play a bigger role in a lot of things we did before. And then you always see, you become part of the institution? Do you need a new innovation team? Yes or no? I would say no. I think we'll keep on doing this, but we're going to organize a bit differently in terms of make smaller teams around certain topics who actually go and do the same stuff but with more focus. So we'll be a team around mobility in public space. There will be a team around health, about financials, etc. So I think we organize smaller innovation teams who will be connected to each other, but we'll have a larger form of autonomy.
This was the Ask Me Anything with the CTO of Amsterdam and not London. Thank you. If there's more questions.
Any questions about London? Yeah, I can answer some questions about
here.
London if you want to.
But we're ready to sign off, I think. So, thank you. And thank you, everybody. And make sure to be back at the conference tomorrow morning at 9, there's one session, and at 10, lots of sessions. And then at 2, we have the plenary meeting. So at 1, we have plenary meetings. Hope to see you all there. Thank you.
That's a great thing about digital conferences. At 9 o'clock is not early at all. You can have your second cup of coffee already at home. Brilliant.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Don't be late.